Well, there's a great deal of anticipation about the forthcoming Dragon spacecraft, which should be docking with the International Space Station in a couple of days from now. Our viewers will know that the Indian astronaut Shubhanshu Shukla was expected to blast off today, but that mission has been delayed. Just how long, we don't know, but it's till the end of this month when the launch window exists. Telling us about the significance of this operation and how things sometimes in space travel can go wrong. But and usually they do go right. Fortunately, we've got a wonderful guest, Neil deGrasse Tyson, and the American astrophysicist and writer with us. Thank you very much, Mr. Tyson, for being with us. Firstly, on the issue of delays in launches, it does happen. This would now be the fifth time that this particular mission has been delayed, but that's not extraordinary per se, is it?
Not at all. I wouldn't sweat it the least. I mean, rocket science is hard. That's that's why it's called rocket science. It's and ask yourself, how many things have to go right for a mission to work? And we've all seen launches. Watching a launch never gets old with the countdown, and you go and everyone has to say, all systems go and check, and say go. All the people who are verifying the launch capability of their little piece of that mission before the thing gets to orbit. And so I would don't fret that there's a delay. It'd be something different, by the way, if we've never done this before. Then the delays would be kind of mysterious. What could happen if we did launch or if we didn't, and why? But we've been to the space station countless times, and the Crew Dragon has been there many, many times. So it's not uncharted territory. What is uncharted is we have an Indian astronaut going to the space station. Congratulations on that.
And that's fantastic. The first one in 41 years. We did have Rakesh Sharma 41 years ago go to the Soyuz, to the Mir, the Russian. No, in fact, it was the Soyuz spacecraft that he was a part of. It wasn't to Mir, but it was 41 years ago. And so, yes, of course, a huge sense of anticipation here.
Yeah. And 41 years, what's interesting to me is while that was a kind of a one-off, right now, this voyage of an Indian astronaut can be seen as part of a broader context of India's reach into space and as a stepping stone, if you will, towards India having independent launches with its own astronauts as a nation. And so this has a little more significance than just a single astronaut gaining access to space. It has significance to the larger ambitions of India as a spacefaring nation.
In fact, it is a stepping stone in a sense to Gaganyaan, which is our crewed mission, which is coming up in 2027. And that's relying to a large extent on indigenous technologies, made-in-home technologies, just the entire habitability module, a lot of the technology, the rockets themselves, all Indian. So, I mean, that's where it comes down to. I mean, NASA has been doing this for decades. India's never done it.
Well, by the way, let me interject there. Yeah. Very important that you mentioned that. I think that's a point of pride for the country. And what Americans occasionally forget is our space program was birthed in part from expertise from German rocket engineers after the Second World War. So it's not clear whether we could have done all of that ourselves, maybe eventually, but not on the timetable that we felt necessary, because remember, we were competing with the Soviet Union for these kinds of achievements. So to have indigenous technologies is an important, that may be more important than who you're launching into space, because you can take ownership of all of the science and technology that goes into it.
Where do you see the Indian space program presently? A lot has been written about frugal engineering, which is, of course, important. But there have been some fairly significant achievements. The Chandrayaan mission to the moon, where particles of water, H2O, were detected. We've had a satellite go around Mars at the cost of a Hollywood movie. So that's something about frugal engineering there. And of course, these huge ambitions about crewed space flight. Where do you see ISRO and how it's come along?
Well, it's been quite, as you said, it's been very efficient in its expenditures and in the accomplishments derived from them. That's a good fact. I ran some numbers, and it turns out that NASA's budget is about the same fraction of the total federal budget here in the United States as the Israel budget is a fraction of the Indian budget. And so we're spending the same sort of fraction of our total wealth on going
Yeah,
into space.
right.
But since the American budget is bigger,
Yeah,
we're spending more. But
yes.
but what it tells us is that the commitment the nation is giving to this enterprise is similar to the
Yeah,
commitment we are giving here in the United States. And one point I want to make is that when India landed on the moon, many headlines said India becomes the fourth nation to land on the moon. And I thought to myself, that's not the headline. The headline is India is the first nation to land softly on the South Pole.
yeah,
Russia tried to get there just a few days earlier, and
yeah,
their mission failed.
yeah,
Okay, so and the South Pole is the next sort of destination for what we want to do. We all want to do on the moon, because as you said, there's water at the basin of craters there, where the sun never gets high enough above the horizon to illuminate the bottoms of those craters. So they are literally where the sun don't shine on the moon. And in those places, any water that has landed there from comet impacts, it stays there forever. It never evaporates back into space. So it still remains to be seen how much total water is there. But if to the extent that we find it, not only can you separate the hydrogen and the oxygen of the H2O, and you can breathe the oxygen, but also by recombining those two atoms, it is highly exothermic. So
yeah,
energy is released, and that's a source of rocket fuel. So ideally, if you want a long-term presence in space, you don't want to have to bring everything there. If you can have what's called in situ resource utilization, ISRU, not
yeah,
ISRO,
yeah,
at NASA, ISRU, it means when you get there, what can you do with the local materials to serve your needs on your expedition and for your long-term survival? So I think India can be very proud of these accomplishments, and the rapidity with which India has risen to participate in such a significant way. And that tracks very nicely with the growth of the Indian economy over recent years. It's not an accident that if you stimulate interest in STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, and math, in your population, then people participate in fields that are the engines of tomorrow's economies, growth economies. And so let's not hide the fact that India still has significant poverty today, but India had poverty before India ever went to space. So you can't blame expenditures on space for the poverty. But what you can do is say, with a growing economy, that tends to lift almost all boats. And you see a country rise up out of whatever challenges they had faced when the economics work out for it.
The other country that's doing remarkably well, of course, is China, but we don't know as much because they certainly aren't as transparent. India and the United States are part of the Artemis missions, the Artemis Accord, which is the peaceful use of space. As we all progress, how important? So, two separate questions. Firstly, do you see China as increasingly a competitor? And B, how important is Artemis in terms of using everybody's knowledge for a peaceful purpose?
So just to clarify just the terms there. So in the United States, our program to return astronauts to the moon is called the Artemis program.
Yeah,
That's a separate fact
from
from
the
the
Artemis Accords.
Yeah, exactly. So the Artemis program is separate from the Artemis Accord, which what you precisely described as an agreement among spacefaring nations that they're signing. By the way, it's an agreement among nations who are not yet spacefaring, who, when they ultimately will participate, they pre-agree to these sort of, I don't want to call them rules and regulations because that sounds so restrictive. It's more it's an agreement that if you discover something on your mission that could be harmful or could benefit missions launched by other countries, you will share that information. It's an openness about your activities in space that could benefit us all. And so it's a very forward-looking, beautiful document that I invite people to Google and find out for themselves just how promising and hopeful a document it is as we all go forward. Now, you asked whether China is a competitor. I guess so. Yeah. And competition is not bad always. It's not always bad. It can sometimes light a flame under your bottom to energize you. But what you don't want is the competition to become sort of nationalistic on a level where, oh, we're better than you, or you better than us, and then now we're going to fight. No, no. It can be a polite competition, as we have in sports, as we have in so many other endeavors in our lives. But ultimately, I'd like to think that the human presence in space no longer distinguishes what country you're from.
Yeah.
We're just representing planet Earth. That's how
Absolutely.
I think about it.
And in fact, that's what this Crew Dragon flight is all about. You've got people from different nationalities. Let's hope it blasts off soon. We've got a big launch window till the end of the month. I think they'll get a fix on it and they'll go up. Thank you very much, Mr. Tyson.
Excellent. Thank you for your interest.